Okay, let's talk about solutions. So there's 4 strategies I'm going to give you tonight that can help your gut recover. Remember, step 1 in this entire process, step 1 is remove the offenders. So this is the food that you're eating that might be creating the damage. This is what's in the food that you're eating that might be contributing to the damage. What are the offenders? The offenders are the foods, the GMOs, the pesticides. The offenders are anything that you might be sensitive or allergic to. It's the food preservatives, it's the dyes, it's those things. Those are the offenders. So, maybe we should say step 1A is identify and then start removing the offenders. You've got to give your gut an opportunity to heal, and you're not going to let it detox. It's not going to recover very effectively if you keep doing the very things that are creating the irritation. So aside from this, after this, now we can start doing things to help our gut recover better. And one of the things that we can do is, contrary also to the nutritional advice you've probably been given, is don't eat frequent meals. We always hear breakfast is the most important meal of the day. We always hear you need to eat several small meals of the day or small meals each day to keep your metabolism going. Like, all that is myth. Nobody's ever proven that any of that's effective. As a matter of fact, we've proven just the opposite, that eating very infrequent meals actually does something very important. It gives your gut rest. And just like when you exercise, you need rest before you exercise again. If you don't allow your gut rest before you ask it to digest again, it's going to be overwhelmed, especially if it's already got a lot of these offenders. So especially if what you're putting in and you're calling food, right, is an offending agent, the more frequent you eat, the more damage you create. But when you eat, again, there's a strategy. This is actually called intermittent fasting. And there are different strategies behind intermittent fasting. I've done some shows in the past on deeper dives of intermittent fasting, but probably the simplest way to get started here is give your gut 16-hour rest periods. And if you rest your gut 16 hours, that means you have an 8-hour window to eat your meals in a day. Then your gut's going to get the vast majority of that time off. It's going to be able to recoup and recover. So again, this is very important for improved digestion and gut function, is to incorporate this. Now, some people go longer. They'll do 18 hours of intermittent fast, or 20 hours of intermittent fast. And those are okay too. Not everybody can tolerate them initially, because fasting for prolonged periods of time, especially if you have a blood sugar issue, and if you have cortisol or insulin imbalances, that can be a bigger challenge. But this is one of the top strategies, one of the most effective ways to start moving your gut in the right direction. Number 2 is eat when you're calm, when you're at peace, right? Most people eat on the run. What happens when you eat on the run is you activate part of your autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system, okay, this is the nervous system. You don't have to think about it working, but there's a part of it called the sympathetic. And so those of you maybe don't know what I'm talking about, maybe you've heard of this. Fight or flight. This is the nervous system in your body. The sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight nervous system that controls the stress mechanism. So when you're under the gun and you're under stress, your body's gearing up to either fight or to run, okay? And when we're eating, we don't want to do either of those things. When we're eating, we want being at peace. We want relaxation. And so relaxation, how do we get relaxation around the time of our meal? Well, one of the things we can do is we can meditate. We can do deep breathing exercises before we eat. Some people sit down and say a prayer. I would say you can pray and meditate and do deep breathing all at the same time. But get your mind in a relaxed state. Sit down when you eat. Eating on the go, eating when you're walking, eating when you're working is a big part of the problem, because when you're doing those things, your body's nervous system is here. And so what this does is it blocks digestion. And so when you're putting a bunch of food in your gut and asking your gut to digest your food, but you're telling your nervous system to distribute all the blood to your muscles to prepare for fight or flight, remember, when we digest, the blood goes to our gut on purpose. This is why after a big meal, what do you want to do? You want to go lie down and take a nap because the blood's not here and the blood's not in your muscles. The blood is in your gut. It's going to your gut. It's being sequestered to your gut to do the work of digestion. So you have to honor what eating is. Eating is done at peace. It's done in a calm scenario. You should slow down and you should take time to eat properly. If you don't, you put stress in your gut when your gut is not capable of proper digestion. And then what does that do? When you don't digest your food, what happens? Your food rots. But it doesn't rot on the plate. It rots inside your body, right? And if your gut's leaking, now all that putrescence, all that putrid byproduct, as it sits there, as you're constipated, as you're not going to the bathroom, as that food just sits there and is sequestered right there in your gut and doesn't move, it starts to decay. And all that decay byproduct now, if your gut's leaking, leaks into your bloodstream, making you tired and lethargic and not feel well and having general malaise and fatigue and chronic inflammation. So eat when you're calm. So eat when you're at peace, right? Don't have a phone argument with somebody and then sit down and try to eat your meal. Number 3, perform deep breathing before eating. And I like to do 5 minutes of just sitting, calming the mind, doing some deep breathing exercises before the meal. Okay? And so this type of breathing is more like yoga breathing. Those of you familiar with yoga breathing, it's belly breathing, where you breathe and you fill in, you don't fill up your chest, you fill up your diaphragm. And so you take about 4 seconds to breathe in, you hold that in breath for about 3 seconds, and then you exhale for about 5. Do that for a total of 5 minutes. And what that actually does is it activates, okay, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the nervous system that improves and promotes digestion. It doesn't block it. So we want to turn on and activate parasympathetic nervous system. What some people will do here is they'll use certain essential oils before they eat, like lavender, which can be a very calming essential oil. Lemon balm can be a calming essential oil. So there's some essential oils that can help activate the parasympathetic nervous system, but I don't like to use essential oils personally because they affect the way I'm going to taste my food. So I like to do this deep breathing. I like to make sure I take a little time, set it aside for when I'm going to eat, where I'm not thinking about work. I'm not thinking about the 1,000 things that I have to do tomorrow or something that's stressing me out, where I'm just thinking about being at peace, right? Just being at peace and being in that moment and having, again, that time where we can get calm, okay? And number 4, and you might be thinking, gosh, Dr. Osborne, that's kind of a silly one. Take a nap after eating. Most of you who, especially if you're tuning in the United States, now if you're tuning in from Europe or across the ocean or across the pond, most of you are like, yep, I do that already. That's great advice. We call it down south in Texas, our neighbors even further south call it a siesta, and it's part of their culture. It's part of the culture, which is to take a nap after a meal. And this is because, remember, we want to sleep and rest so that that blood stays in the gut and does the work of digestion for us. Remember, digestion is critical to get to those nutrients. And so many of you eat and then go right back to work, and that food, it's just not moving. It's not going anywhere. So take that nap. It doesn't have to be super long, but you ever see animals, after animals eat, what do? Just by nature, they lay down. They take a nap. Doesn't matter what animal you're talking about. Pretty much every animal, you watch them eat, and then what do? They lay down, they rest, they take a nap. Humans are the only animals that ignore good sense for the sake of go, and they end up losing out on this very major benefit. Again, this is engaging of the parasympathetic nervous system, engaging of digestion. Why do we do these things? Why? Because generally speaking, if we struggle with a leaky gut, if we struggle with GI symptoms, it's because our gut is irritated. It's because our gut is overwhelmed. So think about this from the common sense perspective. What are we really after here? We're calming things down. We're promoting behaviors that make digestion turn on, that make digestion easier. We're eating less frequently because we're putting less of an overall burden on digestion and you know, the timing in the course of the day where your gut is being demanded to work overtime to process the food that you're eating. So again, the name of the game is take away the triggers, right? What we said, step one is identify and remove the offenders. Step two is good digestive hygiene, which is what we're talking about here. This is good digestion hygiene to get the most out of your food, to give your gut the best chance at digestion. Again, especially if you struggle with poor gut function. All right, so last thing, one of the questions that always comes up is are there things that I should be taking supplementally? Are there nutrients that I'm going to, and I'm not going to go through the entire library of nutrients that you could use for gut function. If you have specific questions, pump those into the feed. But I'm going to talk about a few ones that I think for people in today's world can be very, very helpful. And one of them is just a really solid probiotic, right? A solid probiotic, especially if you've got a history of antibiotic use, especially if you've just recently come out of a surgery and they gave you an antibiotic post-surgery, or they IV'd you with an antibiotic when you were in the hospital, etc. But a good probiotic to support the friendly microbiome, which is also going to support digestion. L-glutamine is important because it's the fuel for your enterocytes. What is an enterocyte? Enterocyte are the cells of the small intestine. The cells of your small intestine, the ones that can become leaky. Okay, these cells don't use glucose for their energy. They use glutamine for their energy. This is why glutamine can be so important. It's the primary source of fuel for the enterocyte. So if your enterocytes are worn out, if they're broken down, if they're struggling and they're not making adequate energy, glutamine can sometimes be the jump start for the enterocyte to help your gut seal and repair itself. Number 3 on this list is a digestive enzyme. Okay, with gluten protection, if you're not sure whether or not you go gluten-free, I have a formulation called Gluten Shield, which has gluten protection, but also is a spectrum of digestive enzymes. If you really struggle with digesting your food, a digestive enzyme sometimes can make or break that digestion, especially if you've got, as I mentioned earlier, pancreas or liver issues. If you've had your gallbladder removed, these are things that you're definitely going to want to consider as supporting your body's ability to break down and digest. Acid, betaine hydrochloride, a form of acid, especially if you've got a history where you have low stomach acid or low stomach acid production. Where I see this most, so take note of this, if you are a blood type A, so if you have a blood type A, if you know your blood type, if you're blood type A, those folks really struggle with adequate acid production in the stomach. So if you say example, you eat 4 ounces of meat, you're going to struggle breaking that down. This is a genetic issue with type A blood types where they struggle with having adequate acid to break those things down. So this can be super supportive in those cases. But additionally, many people, like I said, that think they have heartburn actually don't. They have low stomach acid because there are a number of different reasons. One of the biggest reasons is chronic gluten exposure. Gluten damages the cells in the stomach. They're called parietal cells. And these cells are responsible for naturally producing acid. But if you've got gluten damaging those cells, a lot of people on initially going gluten-free, trying to recover their guts, their stomach is damaged and so not producing adequate acid to break down or digest the proteins in their diet, and this can be very helpful for those individuals. Another one, as a gut relaxer, so if you struggle with the constipation side of things, magnesium can be ultra effective at relaxing the muscles of the gut and allowing for a more regular bowel movement. Magnesium is also very critical for healing and repair and for energy production. So if you've got inflammation or an inflammatory bowel issue, this could be very, very helpful. Now, vitamin C can also help it pulls water into the bowels, so it helps bring water into the bowel and helps flush the bowels. So vitamin C can help as a, not so much as a gut relaxer, but as helping support or stimulate a good bowel movement. But additionally, there's research that shows specifically in people with celiac that vitamin C helps to reduce the inflammation in the GI tract, and that looks kind of mangled, that, sorry. Reduces the inflammation in the GI tract. And this is what's interesting about in celiacs, research shows that 92% have persistent inflammation even though they've changed their diet. 92%, research shows, have persistent inflammation even though they've gone gluten-free. And this is what we suspect, is that they're malnourished, and one of those nutrient deficits, oftentimes in my experience, when I measure, the people that come to see me, we measure their vitamin C, it's oftentimes low, and this is a very powerful ally, or at least it can be, to help those individuals. So that's kind of, again, a crash course overview of some supplements that might be beneficial or helpful. Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below. And as always, thanks for tuning in.